Hello and welcome back to the Allan Kardec USA channel, where we discuss the doctrine of Spiritism as codified in the writings of Allan Kardec. Today we will continue with the reading of the book The Astral City, a book written by the Brazilian medium Chico Xavier, from words transcribed to him from the spirit world by the spirit, Dr. Andre Luiz. Okay, so we covered chapters 1 through 3 previously. Today, we will cover 5 chapters by reading chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. To recap the first 3 chapters briefly, we learned that Dr. Andre Luiz, who is now dead, awoke in a very bad place, a sort of purgatory or hell, and spent quite a bit of time there tormented by many evil spirits, dead souls, also residing there, including many that were accusing him, Dr. Andre Luiz, of having committed suicide, even though he is utterly confused by that accusation, since he knows that he was sick in the hospital when he died during surgery. Dr. Andre Luiz, after finally realizing that he needed to resort to prayer and the power of God, was rescued by a man named Clarence, who appeared with 2 helpers, Lysias and Tobias. And he was taken to the Astral City, to a large facility that appears as if a hospital of some sort where he receives treatment. So let us continue with the Astral City.
I awoke the following day after a deep, refreshing sleep. A comforting light poured through my window, bathing everything in the room with radiance and filling my heart with hope. I felt like a new man, filled with renewed energy and the joy of living. Only one thing clouded my soul. I longed for my home and for my family, so far away. Numerous questions troubled my mind, but my feeling of relief was so great that it calmed my spirit and kept me from further examining my situation. I wanted to get up and enjoy the beauty of my surroundings, but I could not. I realized that without the magnetic cooperation of my attendant, I would not be able to leave my bed. I had scarcely gotten over the many experiences when the door opened and Clarence entered, accompanied by a friendly stranger. They greeted me cordially, wishing me peace. My rescuer from the lower zones asked about my general health, and my attendant quickly came to inform him. Clarence smiled and introduced his companion, Brother Henry de Luna of the medical staff of the spiritual colony. Brother Henry was dressed in white, and his face radiated kindness. He examined me at length, then smiled and spoke. "It is a pity that you've come here by way of suicide." Clarence remained calm, but I felt a surge of revolt within me. Suicide? I remembered the accusation of those perverse beings in the lower zones. Even though I was grateful to my helpers, I couldn't accept this accusation. "I believe you are mistaken," I said, distressed. "My departure from the world had other causes. I fought for over 40 days trying to overcome death. I suffered through 2 serious operations because of an intestinal occlusion." "Quite so," the doctor continued, calm and perfectly composed. "But the occlusion was the result of very serious causes. Perhaps you haven't thought it over enough. The spirit body presents within it a complete history of the actions practiced on earth." Leaning over me, he went on, pointing to different parts of my body. "Let's look at the intestinal zone," he said. "The occlusion was due to cancerous elements, which in turn arose from some indiscretions of yours, in which you contracted syphilis. The disease might not have assumed such grave characteristics had your mental attitudes been firmly based on the principles of moderation and brotherly love. Instead, you chose a dark, anger-filled way of life, which attracted destructive vibrations from those around you. You never imagined that anger attracts negative forces, did you? Your lack of self-control and your thoughtlessness in dealing with others, whom you so often unthinkingly offended, frequently left you under the influence of sickly and inferior beings. These circumstances greatly aggravated your physical state. After a long pause, in which he went on examining me attentively, he continued, "Have you observed, my friend, that your liver was damaged through your action? That your kidneys were also mistreated in your reckless disregard for the divine gift of physical existence?" I felt deeply disappointed, but the doctor, seemingly unaware of my anguish, continued to clarify. "The bodily organs possess incalculable reserves in accordance with the Lord's designs. You, my friend, evaded many excellent opportunities and wasted the precious blessing of physical existence. The long-term assignment which you had been given by those of greater spiritual accomplishment was reduced to half-hearted attempts at work which you never completed. Your entire gastronomical system was destroyed as a direct result of your harmless excesses in food and drink, and your essential energies were devoured by the syphilis you contracted through still other excesses. As we see, the diagnosis is incontestable." I thought about problems of human life and reflected on the many opportunities I had lost. In my life on earth, I had owned many masks, tailoring them to the situation at hand. I had never imagined that I would be asked to account for those seemingly unimportant episodes. I had at that time conceived of human error according to human laws. Everything not prohibited by those laws was natural and acceptable. Here, however, I found another system of judging those errors. I was not confronted by stern judges pronouncing harsh verdicts or facing torture or the infernal abyss. Instead, smiling helpers commented on my weaknesses as if they were dealing with a wayward child. Their superior compassion struck a blow to my human pride. If it was only diabolical beings tormenting me, I would have found my failure less bitter. Clarence's sympathetic kindness, the doctor's warm tone, and the attendant's good-natured patience all served to turn my pride to shame. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed broken-heartedly, realizing that Henry de Luna's conclusions were irrefutable. I admitted the full extent of my faults. Only one torturing truth now remained before me. I had truly committed suicide. I had wasted the precious opportunity of human life and was nothing more than a castaway rescued by charity. It was then that Clarence, stroking my hair in a fatherly manner, spoke. "Stop lamenting, my son. I went in search of you in response to requests made from those in the higher spheres who love you. Your tears will grieve their hearts. Surely you would rather show your gratitude by remaining calm during the examination of your faults, wouldn't you? True, your diagnosis points clearly to suicide, but I assure you that hundreds of others leave the earth daily in exactly the same way you did. Therefore, still your heart. Use the treasure of repentance well. Keep the blessing of remorse in your soul, however late it has arrived. Don't forget that worrying doesn't resolve our problems. Put your trust in the Lord and in our brotherly devotion. Rest your troubled heart, for many of us have already gone the same way as you." At these generous words, I rested my head against his shoulder and wept.
And here we learn why Dr. Andre Luiz has been accused of committing suicide. To put it simply, it was because of the abuse that he inflicted on his own body while he was alive on Earth. This is a very interesting concept to consider, because if we look around us, or even look at ourselves, many of us might be accused of the same thing. Eating all the wrong foods, drinking too much alcohol, and possibly the indiscretions that the medical assistant told Andre Luiz about. Sleeping around, to put it politely, with others, excessively. A matter that caused him to contract a sexually transmitted disease, syphilis, that ended up damaging various organs of his body. And then you have cigarette smokers, something many people already know is going to kill them, and they do it anyway. In this spiritual world that we are reading about, such abuse of our bodies is considered suicide. It is a very scary thought when you think about it. How many of us who don't diet properly, who don't exercise regularly to take care of our bodies, who drink or smoke too much, may likely end up in the lower zones, a type of hell, because of it, and get accused of those same accusations that Dr. Luiz was accused of. Andre Luiz was not concerned with what he was doing on earth with his body. As he said, as long as what he was doing was not against the law, it was, to him, natural and acceptable. He now understands, however, that the accusations of him having committed suicide is true, and he has accepted it, and appears to be deeply remorseful because of it. Note how near the end of the chapter Clarence comforts Andre Luiz and explains to him that he only made an attempt to search for him and get him help after receiving requests from spirits in the higher planes, spirits that have progressed to a higher degree, that love him.
Are you Clarence's patient? The question was put to me by a young man with a kind expression. He smiled as he entered, carrying what looked like a large medical bag. I nodded that I was, and he introduced himself. I am Luiz, your brother. My director, Assistant Dr. Henry de Luna, has placed you under my care as long as you need treatment. Are you a medical assistant? I asked. I am a visiting attendant in health services. As such, I not only help with the nursing, but also go on rounds, alerting the doctors when help is needed, and attending to the needs of newly arrived patients. Noting my interest, he went on, there are many such assistants here in the Astral City. Naturally, as a newcomer, you are still unaware of the extent of our activities. Just to give you an idea, there are over 1,000 patients here in this ward alone, and this is one of the smallest buildings in our hospital. This is truly wonderful, I said. Luiz, perceiving that I was about to continue repeating my praises, rose quickly from his chair and carefully began his examination. Your intestinal zones show serious lesions and unmistakable signs of cancer. Your liver is ruptured in several areas, and your kidneys show signs of premature failure. Do you know what that means? Yes, the doctor explained it to me yesterday. These disturbances are all of my own doing. Noting my obvious embarrassment at this confession, he continued, in the group of 80 patients under my care, 57 are in the same condition as you. Did you know that other patients arrive mutilated? Those who have misused their sight arrive without eyes.
Those who have misused their sight arrive without eyes. What exactly is this saying? I can only conclude from Scripture that it mostly has a sexual connotation. In the Bible, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 11, verses 34 and 35, we see, "The lamp of the body is the eye. Therefore, when your eye is good, your whole body also is full of light. But when your eye is bad, your body also is full of darkness. Therefore, take heed that the light which is in you is not darkness." Luke chapter 11, 34 and 35. And this scripture typically refers back to David's sin from 2 Samuel chapter 11, when his downfall began, when he misused his sight by observing from a rooftop a woman named Bathsheba who was bathing. In today's day and age, misusing one's sight might have a lot to do with watching pornography. And once again, while it is not illegal to do so, there may be very serious consequences after death for those who engage in that activity. Luiz continues speaking to Andre Luiz.
Others who have used the gift of being clever in committing crimes come to us paralyzed or legless. Still others who have lived sexually depraved lives enter spirit life totally insane. The Astral City is not a settlement of triumphant spirits in the common sense of the word. We are happy because we have constructive work to do, and there is a job in every corner of our colony because the Lord blessed us with the opportunity to serve. He paused briefly, and I said, "Please go on with your explanation, Luiz. I feel so peaceful and relieved. Isn't this a heavenly abode for the spiritual elect?" Luiz smiled and answered, "Let's keep in mind the old teaching, many are called, but few are chosen." Gazing at the distant horizon, flooded with memories from his own past, he continued, "Many religions on earth summon us to the celestial feast. No one who has felt the existence of God can deny that in good conscience. Yes, many are called, but few answer the call. Most of mankind accepts a different invitation instead. We waste our opportunities, straying from our chosen path, allowing our desires to rule our lives, and thoughtlessly destroy our bodies. The ultimate result is that thousands of us leave the world in a state of confusion. Multitudes of insane, diseased, and ignorant spirits wander, as you did, in the spirit spheres closer to the earth." Seeing my astonishment, he asked, "Did you believe that physical death brings us to miraculous places? We must work hard and perform difficult services to achieve spiritual growth. If we have moral debts to pay on the planet, we must surely return to pay them, regardless of the progress we have made, breaking the chains of hatred and replacing them with the sacred bonds of love. It wouldn't be fair to ask others to clear the field in which we ourselves have sown thorns. This is what is meant, my friend, by the saying, 'Many are called, but few are chosen.' The Lord forgets no one, yet so few of us remember the Lord." Confronted with the idea of individual responsibility and remembering my own errors, I could not help but condemn my stubbornness. But before I had time to vent my remorse, my kind attendant lifted up his hand and spoke. "Stop. Let us concentrate on the work to be done. Those who are sincerely repentant must learn to be silent and start anew." He carefully proceeded with a magnetic medical treatment. And then, while treating the area around my lower intestines, he continued his explanation. "Have you noticed the specialized treatment of your cancerous zones? You see, all honest work in the field of medicine is based on loving care, but the actual healing is left to the patient. You will be treated with great care and will feel as fit as you did as a youth on earth. You will work hard, and I believe you will become one of the best assistants in the Astral City. However, the case of your weakness will stay with you until you have eliminated all traces of your indiscretions and misuse of your health, which still remain in your spirit body. Our earthly body, so often misused, is given to us as a blessed instrument through which we can cure our spirit if we dedicate ourselves to the task. I meditated deeply on what I had just heard, thinking on the infinite mercy of God, and was moved to tears. Lysias calmly finished the day's treatment, and then he spoke. Tears are purifying medicine when they aren't caused by feelings of revolt. So cry, my friend, and ease your heart. Let us bless our physical body with its countless microscopic cells, so humble and precious, so detested yet so sublime for the service they render us. Without them, how many thousands of years we would spend wrapped up in the mists of ignorance. Thus speaking, Lysias laid a gentle hand on my head and took his leave.
In this chapter, we learn of Lysias, who not only appears as a miraculous healer of severe conditions to the spirit body, as was described, but also as a mentor and giver of a lot of really good advice. Lysias performs the healing process by using a magnetic treatment. This doesn't mean they are using magnets. It is more of using the patient's body to attract and absorb all of the thoughts of love as a cure. Lysias explains that he will do what he can, but it is up to the patient to do more of his own healing.
The following day, after the evening prayer, Clarence came to see me accompanied by my attendant, Lysias. Radiating kindness, Clarence asked affectionately, "How are you? A little better, I hope?" Like any patient on earth who suddenly finds himself the center of attention, I was moved to self-pity. Reverting to my old habit of abusing brotherly love, I began to complain. "I do feel a little better, but I am still suffering a great deal. I hurt below my stomach, and I feel a strange sense of anguish in my heart. My misery has been heavy, my friends. I never knew I could withstand so much suffering. Now that I can think clearly again, I feel sure that these trials have sapped all of my remaining strength." Clarence listened attentively, not showing the least sign of impatience. He even seemed interested, and his attitude encouraged me to continue. "Not only that, my moral sufferings are really indescribable. Now that the outside storm has subsided, thanks to the assistance I have received here, I've had to face a storm within my soul. What has become of my wife and children? I wonder whether my eldest child, my only son, has followed the plans I made for him. And what about my dear daughters and my wife, who was sure that she would die of loneliness if we were ever parted? What of my wonderful wife? I can still feel her tears from my last moments on earth. I can't say how long I've been living this nightmare of our separation. My continuous suffering has robbed me of all sense of time. Where is my poor wife? Weeping beside the cold ashes of my body? Or is she at the gates of death herself? What bitter sorrow! What a terrible fate for a man devoted to his family! Very few have gone through as much as I'm sure. Why, even on earth, I suffered years of transformations, bitter disappointments, and impairments, and was granted only a few hours of happiness in return. Then I was subjected to a painful physical death, followed by unceasing torture as a spirit, and a never-ending succession of miseries and tears. Is there no way of attaining peace? As much as I may wish to adopt an optimistic attitude, I can't help feeling heavy-hearted and full of grief. What an unfortunate fate, my generous helper. By that time, my feelings of self-pity had reached such proportions that my words gave way to tears. Clarence, however, rose calmly and asked simply, "My dear friend, do you really seek your spiritual cure?" I nodded in agreement, and he went on. "Then learn not to speak so much of yourself and your sufferings. Self-pity is a symptom of mental illness, which is time-consuming and difficult to cure. It is imperative that you create new trains of thought and control your words. The only way to spiritual balance is to open your heart to the divine light. If you consider the necessary effort to be an oppressive burden, or see the struggle for redemption as an imposition, it is a sure sign of spiritual blindness. The more you dwell on your painful experiences, the more you bind yourself to them. You can be sure that the same Creator who shelters and watches over you will also care for your loved ones on earth. We should certainly regard the family as a sacred institution, but always keep in mind that it is just a small branch of the universal family under the loving guidance of our divine Creator. You can count on us to resolve your present problems and sketch plans for your future, but neither you nor we have the time to waste on your complaints. We in this colony accept the hardest jobs as a welcome opportunity for rising to a higher level as a spirit, remembering while we plod along, weighted down with moral depths, that providence is unsurpassed in its love. If you too wish to stay with us, you must learn to think properly." Meanwhile, my tears had dried. His words had brought me back to my senses. I was ashamed of my own weakness, and I adopted a different attitude. "While in the flesh," continued Clarence, "didn't you compete for lucrative positions, knowing their advantages? Didn't you appreciate the legitimate means of increasing the financial well-being of your loved ones? Weren't you engaged in obtaining reasonable fees in the interest of adding to the comfort and stability of your family? Here, the program is the same, only the details differ. On earth, conventionalities and money are the ruling forces, whereas here we aim at constructive work with lasting benefits to the immortal soul. We look on suffering as a means to enrich the soul, and on each suffering as a step towards our divine goal. Can you see the difference? Weak souls resist service and remain inactive, venting their complaints to all. Strong ones, though, accept the tasks given to them as constructive steps on the path towards perfection. Mind you, no one will blame you for missing your earthly family, or would ever think of extinguishing your source of sublime feelings. Nevertheless, you must remember that tears of despair help nothing. If you really love your earthly family and wish to be useful to them, you must first accept your present condition cheerfully. A long pause ensued. Clarence's advice has changed the current of my thoughts, and I began to ponder on his wisdom. While I was still immersed in deep reflection, my helper, like a father who forgets the waywardness of his child and recommences a lesson with the same serenity, asked again with a bright smile, "Well, how are you now? A little better?" Pleased and comforted to feel that I was forgotten, like a little boy anxious to learn, I replied, "I am better now, to better understand the divine plan."
Andre Luiz is presented here as extremely upset about what his wife and children must be going through now that he's gone. He goes on about how much he is suffering himself because of all the miserable events that have occurred. Clarence explains that complaining so much about what he is feeling is only going to torture him more, and his progress in healing will be very slow. Clarence tells Andre Luiz that God will look over his family on earth and they will eventually move on just fine without him. Clarence also explains, however, how suffering is a necessity or unavoidable in the progress of the human soul or as a spirit.
Lysias came daily for my treatment, and Clarence continued to visit me regularly. I began to feel at ease as I endeavored to adapt myself to my new situation. I noticed, though, that I would quickly relapse any time I began to dwell on my problems again. The anguish, the fear of the unknown, and the discomfort of maladjustment would all return. Yet, in spite of everything, I felt a certain inner stability. I derived great pleasure from leaning out of my window and gazing at the vast horizon. I was impressed by the difference between my surroundings here and on Earth. Nearly everything seemed to be an improved copy of Earth. The colors were more harmoniously blended, and the very substance of things was more delicate. The ground was carpeted with greenery, and I could see large trees, rich orchards, and delightful gardens everywhere. A range of hills with light-crowned summits stood beyond the plain on which the Astral City was situated, and graceful buildings appeared at regular intervals a short distance away. These buildings of various styles had one thing in common: a profusion of flowers at their entrances. I noticed some charming little bungalows among them, rows of small cottage-type homes, surrounded by colorful roses springing up from among the ivy that covered the walls in contrasting colors. Birds with brilliant feathers flew about, descending in groups from time to time onto the tall, bright towers that reached for the sky. As I continued to watch curiously from my window, I was surprised to find some domestic animals among the trees some distance away. During these periods of deep meditation, my mind was filled with countless speculations. Considering that I found myself on an astral plane, I could not understand the similarity of things here to those on earth. Lysias, my obliging and constant companion, was always ready to explain. Death of the physical body does not take humans instantly to miraculous spheres. Every evolutionary process progresses through graduation. There are many different planes for discarnate spirits, just as there are many wondrous regions for those still in the flesh. All souls, feelings, forms, and things are governed by the principles of natural evolution and hierarchy. Only the fact that I had stayed under treatment for so many weeks without a single visit from someone that I had known on earth worried me somewhat. Surely I was not the only one in my circle of friends and relatives to be struggling with the enigma of death. My parents had departed before me, as had various friends. Why, then, had none of them come to see me during my recovery, to bring a little cheer to my aching heart? I would have been satisfied with even a few moments of comfort. One day, when I could no longer silence my doubts, I asked my attendant, "Tell me, dear Lysias, is it possible to meet those who left the earth before us?" "Why, do you imagine yourself forgotten?" he asked. "Yes, in fact, I do. Why has no one come to see me? On earth, I always relied implicitly on my mother's devotion. Yet to this day, I have heard nothing from her, or from my father, who died 3 years before me." "Well, you are mistaken about your mother. She has been helping you night and day since the crisis you went through before you arrived here. She doubled her assistance when you fell ill for the last time. You aren't aware yet, are you, that your stay in the lower spheres lasted for over 8 years. In all that time, she never lost hope and often came to the Astral City to intercede on your behalf. She enlisted the services of Clarence, who began visiting you frequently until the moment when you, the conceited earthly doctor, remembered that you were also a child of God. Do you see that now? I felt my eyes well with tears. I had not known that I had been away from the earth for so long. I wanted to speak, to find out about those unseen efforts, but my vocal cords seemed numb. My heart was too full to allow me to speak. On the day you prayed with all your heart, continued Lysias, when you finally realized that everything in the universe belongs to our Almighty God, even your tears were different. As you know, rain can at times be creative, at other times destructive. The Lord doesn't wait for our prayers to love us. Yet, just as a dirty mirror cannot reflect the light, it is indispensable for us to cleanse ourselves and build a receptive attitude in order to understand God's infinite goodness. Thus, it is not the Creator who needs our penance. It is we who need it for the immeasurable service that it renders us. Do you see? Clarence, in answer to your devoted mother's pleas, had no trouble finding you. It was you who took so long to find Clarence. I was told that when your mother heard that you had broken through the shadows into the light, she wept with joy. And where is my mother now? I cried at last. If possible, I should like to see and embrace her, to fall on my knees at her feet. She doesn't live in the Astral City, he informed me. She inhabits higher spheres where she works, not exclusively for you, but for the good of many. Noting my disappointment, he added, she is sure to come and see you. When one eagerly wishes for something, it is already half obtained. Here we have your own example. For years you wandered at random, a prey to fear, distress, and delusionment. Yet as soon as you felt the necessity for divine assistance, you expanded the range of your mental vibrations and obtained vision and help. Encouraged by the explanation I had just received, I said resolutely, then I will wish it with all my heart, and she shall come. Lysias smiled, and as he took his leave, he added this friendly advice. Correct, but keep in mind that all deserving requests should contain 3 basic prerequisites: an active will, persevering work, and merit. In other words, one must first wish, then work towards that wish, and finally be deserving of what he requested. Lysias departed smiling, while I fell into a deep meditation, wondering how such a vast program could have been expressed in so few words.
Lysias, once again appearing as a great teacher of sorts, explains certain matters to Andre Luiz, who is confused as to how the spiritual world that he is living in is in some ways very similar to Earth. An improved version, Andre Luiz had called it, but still consisting of so many of the same types of things. Lysias tells him death of the physical body does not take humans instantly to miraculous spheres. This is what most people that believe in an afterlife think, don't they? Oh, there might be some of this planet that go straight to a much higher place than something like the Astral City. But we are talking about those here on Earth who lived a life helping others and doing charitable work, treating everyone with kindness and respect, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. One of the greatest lessons taught to us by Jesus. And if we lived a full life fulfilling that alone, we can almost guarantee our ascent to a much higher plane in the spirit world. But here we are almost talking about pure living angels on earth, saints. And how many of us really live up to those standards? We also learn in this chapter that Andre Luis's mother was at least one of those beings from a higher spiritual plane who loves him and had watched over him throughout his illness on earth, and for a period of 8 years in the lower zone, the hell that he was living in. She watched over him. She had visited Clarence during that time and asked him to intercede and get Andre Luis the help that he needs. As Andre Luis described earlier, he had no sense of time, as Spiritism teaches us is normally the case once in the spirit world. Andre Luis, therefore, had no idea that he was there that long.
For the first time after some weeks under intense treatment, I ventured out, accompanied by Lysias. The sight of the streets impressed me. The wide avenues, bordered with shady streets, which stretched out before us, were filled with pure air and an atmosphere of profound spiritual tranquility. Yet I saw no signs of inactivity or idleness anywhere. Instead, the streets were crowded. I watched as the crowds passed by me. Some seemed absorbed in thoughts, while others smiled cordially as they passed. Lysias, seeing my surprise, quickly began to explain. We are now in the district of the Ministry of Assistance. Everything you see here, all of the buildings and houses, are either institutions where the activities of our jurisdiction are carried out, or homes for our working staff and instructors. In the ministry, patients are assisted, prayers are heard and sorted, earthly reincarnations are planned, and rescue groups are assembled to provide help for those inhabiting the lower spirit zones or those who are suffering on earth. Here, all problems related to human suffering are examined and solutions are studied. So there is a ministry of assistance in the Astral City, I asked. And why not? All of our activities here are controlled by an organization which is constantly improving under the efficient supervision of those watching over our destinies. During our collective prayers, didn't you notice our governor surrounded by his 72 assistants? They are the ministers of the Astral City. The colony, whose purpose is essentially work and accomplishment, is divided into 6 ministries, each under the direction of 12 ministers. The 6 ministries are named Regeneration, Assistance, Communication, Elucidation, Elevation, and Divine Union. The first 4 connects us with the earth. The other 2 link us to the higher spheres. So you see, our spiritual city is really a transition zone. The roughest, most material activities are carried out by the Ministry of Regeneration. The most sublime is the Ministry of Divine Union. Clarence, our friendly instructor, is one of the 12 ministers of assistance. I never imagined the possibility of finding such a complete organization after the death of the physical body, I said. Yes, Lysias continued, the evil of illusion is very dense in the spheres of the flesh. The average human is unaware that all manifestations of order around him proceed from higher planes. Just as nature becomes a garden when tended by people, so the mind, less in primitive creatures, is transformed into a creative force when inspired by consciousness, functioning in higher spheres. Every useful organization on the material plane, such as on earth, has its roots in higher spiritual worlds. Do those regions of the Astral City have a history like the great cities of Earth? Certainly. All of the planes near the Earth possess their own specific nature and unique history. The Astral City is an old settlement, founded by a group of distinguished Portuguese pioneers who, after passing on, settled in the spirit plains over Brazil in the 16th century. According to the record archives of our colony, these settlers at first encountered tremendous and exhausting difficulties here. There are obstacles in the invisible zones close to the earth, just as there are on the earth itself. Enormous areas with undeveloped potential here are comparable to the great tracts of forbidden terrain on earth. The pioneers' work was indeed hard and discouraging, even for the stronger spirits. The area where delicate vibrations and majestic buildings now abound was also peopled with other more primitive inhabitants whose architecture reflected their elementary minds and who filled the atmosphere with their undeveloped thoughts. Still, the founders did not lose heart. They proceeded with their efforts, following the example of the old world settlers on the physical plane. Only they substituted persevering work, brotherly solidarity, and spiritual love for the violence, war, and slavery. By this time, we had reached a large, artistically designed square filled with beautiful gardens. In its center stood a magnificent palace crowned with majestic and lofty towers whose tips reached so high they disappeared from sight. Here, where the government house now stands, the settlers placed the cornerstone of the colony. Pointing to the palace, Lysias went on. This square is the converging point of the 6 ministries I told you about. They start at the government house and stretch out in a triangular shape. Our devoted governor lives here. A staff of 3,000 individuals assist him in his administrative duties. He is the most dedicated and untiring worker in the colony. The ministers travel at times to other spheres to renew their energies and acquire new knowledge. And we, too, have our habitual amusements. Only the governor has no leisure time whatsoever. While he insists that we take periodic vacations to rest, he himself works ceaselessly, sacrificing even his sleeping hours. It seems he finds his reward in never-ending service. I have been here for 40 years, and except for the collective prayers, I have never seen the governor at any public entertainment. Yet the radiation of his powerful mind reaches every branch of activity, and his fatherly assistance involves everybody and everything here. After a long pause, the friendly attendant continued. Only a short time ago, we celebrated the 114th anniversary of his generous administration. Lysias went on walking in devoted silence, while I, keeping pace with him, gazed in awe at the marvelous towers which seemed to pierce the skies.
Andre Luiz was finally able to leave the confines of the Ministry of Assistance, where he was being attended to medically, as one would in a hospital, and go for a walk with Lysias. Andre Luiz is surprised to see what appears to be establishments so well organized. Lysias explains that they are in the district of the Ministry of Assistance. Lysias tells him that the region had its first settlers long ago and that it developed as they progressed over the centuries that followed. Once again, we are presented with circumstances that very few of us would imagine as taking place in the spirit world, and even more for anyone who believes we go straight to some sort of heaven in a much higher plane, and had pictured such a place very differently. Please be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you are alerted when the next video is uploaded with further readings of the Astral City. You may also share your comments below, or if you wish to write to me personally, I can be reached at kardecusa@gmail.com. My name is Ciso. Take care and have a blessed day.